Last night was a full immersion in country to country in Dublin. And how were they and how were you?
They were great. I honestly, I felt like I was sort of back home in Nashville. I think the crowds over here are a listening crowd, which is where I'm sort of from. It's just, people that really want to hear the lyrics and the meaning behind the song. And so, no, but they were also a good dose of rambunctious, too. So it was a fun show.
It's the first time we've had rambunctious, really, and one of these discussions is fantastic. Let's have a listen to some music, because this is one of my favorite things from, I want to call it last year's record, but it feels like it's been around for a little while, and it also feels as if it's a very new record as well. But this is, I Could Use a Love Song. Shall we have a little listen?
I could use a love song that takes me back just like that when it comes on to a time when I wouldn't roll my eyes at a guy and a girl who make it work in a world that for me so far just seems to go so wrong. Yeah, I could use a love song.
Lovely, isn't it?
Thanks. Thank you.
And am I right in saying that's a current single?
Yes, we just announced it in the U.S. That'll be my next.
And you write or co-write all your songs. So tell us a little bit how this one came on, because it's described as is it a post-breakup song?
Yeah, and I was going through a breakup that had just sort of come to a close, and I was riding with some friends of mine in town, and we had all just had a really bad morning. I think it was like we woke up on the wrong side of the bed or something. My co-writer Laura Veltz got a speeding ticket on her way over to the right, and Jimmy Robbins, my other co-writer, and I don't know what happened to us. It was so long ago, but we were just all in the dumps that morning, and we decided at 11 a.m. to go across the street to a bar and put off the co-write for a little bit. And we just had a drink, and I was sort of coming to the end of recording Hero.
Right.
And Laura, I believe, asked me if there was anything on my record that I was missing. And I was sort of joking. I was like, I don't know, I don't really have any love songs on this album because I just went through this monumental heartbreak. But I could use a love song. And I think she was like, well, hey, that would actually be a really cool idea, like if you could just use one in general. But we tried to spin it into like a really heartbreaking but hopeful way.
I love that when the kind of story emerges about how it came about, and it just is natural part of conversation. I suppose that's a lovely thing about co-writing. It might not have happened. That conversation might not have taken place with yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's why I love collaborating with other writers and friends of mine, because they get you talking. It's almost like a therapy session, and then you come to some realization. You're like, oh wow, I don't think I would have come to that quite as quickly on my own. So that's what's great about writing songs with people.
We've obviously discovered you within the last year or so, or last couple of, however long it's been, but it's fairly recently. But this album, Hero, is actually your fourth album?
Yeah.
And that's interesting, because you talked about moving to town. And has that been your fourth album since you moved to Nashville as well?
Well, I recorded my first album when I was 14.
Wow.
And I was living in Texas, which is where I'm from, and I recorded 3 albums, and I was touring as a kid, basically, in bars and honky-tonks in Texas for like 10 years. And I think I was 22 or 23 when I moved to Nashville, so I'd already self-released those 3 albums. So Hero is I sort of call it my first album, on a major scale. Like
absolutely.
On a label.
And it is a major scale.
A little different.
Yeah. When you first went to Nashville, there's that great tradition of working with other people. You talked about it there, the co-writing thing. And you actually had some success early on co-writing, didn't you?
Yeah, I was very fortunate. I mean, I worked my butt off, and I wrote every day, and it was like an office job where you go in at 9 or 10, and then you write a song, and you do it 5 days a week, and it's what you go in and you get paid to do if you're lucky. And Tim McGraw recorded a song of mine 3 years ago, and it's called Last Turn Home, and it was never on the radio, but it was just a really special song that he recorded. And
let's have a listen.
No, great.
Thank God that we don't have to be alone. Closer I get, the more that my heart knows. You're like that last hurting hole.
Nice.
Thanks. I haven't heard that in a while.
Yeah. How did it feel when, that first happened? Because that must have been a lovely breakthrough.
Yeah, it was extremely validating, and especially when that's your first recording of someone is someone as iconic as Tim McGraw. I mean, it was not exactly small potatoes, as my grandmother would like to say. But no, it was so cool to like sit down in his label's office, and they were basically playing it for me way too early. They were like, "We just want you to hear your first cut with another artist," and hearing Tim McGraw's voice sing back to you words that you wrote a year prior in a dusty old closet somewhere. It was so validating, and it felt like I had made it. Like I had made it into Nashville finally.
Absolutely, you had. But then greater things were to happen, and all the time that you were, doing these co-writing sessions and you getting up early and doing all the thing, were you quietly kind of planning this next record? Or how was it working for you? How did we suddenly discover? I mean, we discovered Maren Morris because a massive record happened in Nashville and country music. But how was the plan going? Were you secretly kind of stashing songs away?
Yes and no. I moved to Nashville not to be an artist. I just wanted to write for people like Tim and, get cuts as a writer and just make a living doing that. And then somewhere along the way, my publisher, I would send songs into her, and I kept getting this email back, like, "Love this song, Maren, but I don't even know who to send this to because it just has you written all over it. And so it's going to be hard for someone to hear themselves in this song because it's so..."
Were you always singing the demos?
Yeah, I was. Usually, like, if it was a girl song or,
Sure.
Unisex, I would sing the demo and whatever. But I was so annoyed hearing that response over email because as a writer, that's my bread and butter, is to have artists record songs of mine. And so for her to say, I don't know who to send this to because it's you, it's not them. And
But we see these young kids on talent shows and all kind of things, and what they always say is, "Of course, my dream is I always wanted this. This is the one thing I always want. I can't exist without it." And you're saying, actually, you would have been quite happy being a writer.
Yeah, and I think, well, as I was saying earlier, I've been touring as a kid in Texas and performing. And so when I moved to Nashville, I was sort of hanging my hat up on performing. I was like retired at 22. I just wanted to be behind the scenes. And
Really?
I think a lot of that was just I needed a break from being out on a stage for a second and to figure out my voice. And I found it in those writing rooms. And eventually I realized my publisher wasn't insulting me. She was saying, "You need to be making a record. You don't need to be writing just for these other people."
This is absolutely fascinating. So when it came to My Church, for example, was that a song that you were thinking, oh, someone else could do that?
No, that was the first song I ever wrote and heard back later that night that I realized, oh my goodness, like I have to be really protective of this song. I didn't want to send it to anyone. I was being overly protective and just like paranoid. But you hear these like nightmare stories in Nashville, like if you're a writer and you want to make a record where an artist accidentally hears a song that you want to keep for yourself. I've had it happen to friends, and you're sort of in this gridlock at that point where you have to give it to them because they're bigger than you. So I was so protective of My Church.
But you didn't have a record label at this point, is this true?
No. And I didn't really like have the goal to be signed. I just wanted to hear my voice on a professional recording of My Church because it was so true to my story and how I feel about music. And there was just this part of me that would be really heartbroken if someone else sang it. And so I immediately like put a stamp on it and just I wanted it to be mine. And
how
sort of
long
selfish in that way.
How long was it between that writing session for that song and the realization of it coming out and all over the radio? I mean, how long did that? What was the process that brought you to a major label, for example? Was it that song?
Yeah, I think it was My Church and 80s Mercedes. Those two songs we played for a couple people and had a few record deal offers come onto the table. But those
On
were
the basis
leading,
of these two songs?
Yeah, they were leading the charge. And also, like, I had been a familiar writer name in town, so I wasn't like a stranger to these label people. I had sat in their offices for years pitching them songs for their artists. So they were like, oh, you're doing this now. And I had those two songs, and I had a couple offers. And I think, like, the time between writing My Church and it going to radio, it was probably a year and a half.
Right.
Not even 2 years. So it
We
was
only heard it after it become massive, I think, over here. But how quickly did it become massive on the radio over in the States?
I think it just had this instant momentum. But as a new artist, it's like you are going into it with all your eggs in that basket.
Yeah.
Because I've had so many friends have record deals and get dropped by their labels like a year later because their first single didn't perform well.
Yeah.
And so I thought in the back of my mind, if I only get one shot at a single, My Church is going to have to be the one. But it caught fire pretty quickly. And
There's probably no one in this room who doesn't know this song, but for the one person who doesn't, let's just remind ourselves.
Can I get a hallelujah? Can I get an amen? Feels like the Holy Ghost running through ya. When I play the highway FM, I find my soul revival, singing every single verse. Yeah, I guess that's my church.
you'll hear that tonight.
I got to tell you, I never tire of hearing that song. It just always
Thank
kind of puts a
you.
smile on my face.
Thanks.
What was interesting was that you kind of saluted two distinct parts of the South in America. Country music, you're bigging them up, and the church. But it could have kind of maybe worked against you as well, because people might have thought you might have been slightly sacrilegious. Did it all work in your favor on that one?
I had a couple people sort of say this is like blasphemy.
Okay.
But I honestly wasn't really writing it from the perspective of it being super religious. It was just more about growing up with music, having that collective mindset when you're at a show with a bunch of strangers, and it's sort of that congregation of just music being a universal healer.
How much was it your story? I mean, did you grow up with people? Did you know Hank Williams? Did you know Johnny Cash?
Personally, no. But I was reared on those
Through your
artists.
folks?
Yeah. Well, my grandparents actually. My parents were more into, I think, rock and roll and whatnot. But my grandparents introduced me to Patsy Cline and Tammy Wynette and Hank and Johnny, and I eventually just started doing all my own research and fell in love with each decade as it passed, and started getting into Merle Haggard and Waylon and Willie Nelson and all of those artists that have shaped the genre and were rebels at the time. And so they were all heroes to me because they were paving their own lane, and they didn't sound like anyone else, and they brought people together in a really crazy way. And you see the impact of those classic artists like Johnny Cash across the world here. And even though it's sort of born in one place, to see it transcend and come all the way over here, and it's so cool. I think that's sort of spiritual in a way, the way that happens, the way that music works.
If this fame game and this recording game doesn't ever work out for you, Maren Morris, you would be a fantastic ambassador for country music. What a great spokesperson she is for saying all the things we love to hear.
Thank you.
How much did life change? Going from being the writer to being the artist to being the successful artist. Was it a real sea change for you personally?
I think there are always adjustments, and you can't be totally prepared for the crazy rocket ship ride that happens, or has happened. But I just always sort of say, I'm about to be 27, and I remember being 17 and just like dying to have a record deal. And I'm so glad I did not get one at that time.
Really?
I would have been a total nightmare.
Yeah.
So, and I'm not like old, but I feel like I've seen some things and I've gone through some heartbreaks and written some songs about it. And I think I have, because I have, really great family and friends around me, I've got a good head on my shoulders. So, it's day by day, but it's been the most fun year of my life. And I mean, it brought me all the way over here. So
Yeah,
it's
we're very
been
glad
a
about
pretty
that.
good one.
Yeah. And what a lovely turn of events where you film a video for my church in an 80s Mercedes, and you have a song handily waiting to come out called 80s Mercedes.
Yeah, it's weird. It's like we planned it. The car in the My Church video is actually sort of a circa 1970s Mercedes.
Oh, well, there you go.
And so we didn't, and I had to actually drive it, and it did not have power steering. It was so hard. So I'm actually driving the car in that video. It's a beautiful car, but oh my goodness, it was giving me hell that day.
Okay, well, shall we have a listen to an 80s Mercedes?
Feel like a hard to get started when I'm driving, turning every head. Hell, I ain't even trying. Got them raving shades, pretty in pink. Call me old school, but hey, I'm a 90s baby in my 80s Mercedes. I'm a 90s baby in my 80s Mercedes.
Excellent. Great things happened to you on the basis of this record, Hero, and recently you were at the Grammys.
Yes.
You won a Grammy. Remind us which Grammy you won.
I won a Grammy from My Church for Best Country Solo Performance. So that was very cool. And I got to perform, which was even crazier.
It must have been an amazing night. I mean, I was reading, I think, one of your tweets or something that you kind of woke up and you said, did I really kind of bump into Stevie Wonder last night? And was it that kind of night?
Yeah, that was actually the night before the Grammys at the Clive Davis party, which is like this big benefit gala. And I was waiting in the wings to sing, and someone like bumped into me, and it was his manager. And he was like, "Oh, sorry, coming through." And I looked back, and I was like, "Oh, it's okay." Oh my God!
It's Stevie Wonder.
I mean, if I describe it, it sounds like I was walking through a dream because like Ringo Starr was there and like P. Diddy. And it was just the weirdest night of my life. But the Grammys, I just remember, that was obviously my first time going and sitting in the crowd, and my mom was my date that night, and she's never gotten a good seat at one of those things. So we were just freaking out at all the performances, and then I was, I had the best night because I won, and then right after I won, I performed. So my performance, like, my nerves went away because it was like, okay, I think you've got this. And Alicia
Would
Keys
you have been really
was
nervous?
my perform partner.
Would it have been really nerve-wracking just to kind of do it cold without knowing that, do you think?
I mean, obviously, I would have been okay, but it was more fun performing as a winner than a loser.
She's just full of great quotes. We're going to use them for the rest of the year. Maren, we did promise the audience that we would take questions. People very kindly wrote questions.
Cool.
And they're all things I think you can probably answer. And it's lovely because people have come from all over different parts of Scotland. And I'm going to just try and name check. This is from Stan Quirk, who's from Milton of Campsie. And he says, what triggered your career to move from writing to performing for other artists in your own right? And you've sort of answered that, but maybe you want to just add a little bit for Stan. What was the sort of triggering?
Is Stan here?
Stan here.
Oh, hi,
he stands
Stan.
there, yeah.
Hi. I mean, to put it in a nutshell, I really just missed being on stage and being the voice behind the microphone. I think there is a little piece of every songwriter that is an artist in their own right, whether they like to admit it or not. It's a scary thing, putting your name on something and, opening yourself up to the world. But there's such a beauty in that instant connection when you're on stage and you're looking at fans, like being moved by music. And that's something that you don't really get to experience every night as a songwriter. So that was the moment I was really wanting back, was just that instant connection with the fans.
Stan, can you come in every week and write some questions?
Great question, Stan.
Yeah, it was great. Olivia Kerr, who's aged 12 from Dalry. Is Olivia here? Oh, she's right in front row.
Hi.
She says to Maren, you've recently announced your Hero Tour will be coming to the UK, which is November, isn't it? Or
Yeah.
November. Coming to Glasgow as well.
It is, yeah.
We'll post that up. And if you could see anyone in concert, past or present, who would it be?
Oh, man. I would love to see Shaka Khan.
Interesting.
She's one of my favorite singers, and I actually sort of fashion myself, after like her vocal stylings. I just love to belt things out, and I love all the Motown music. I'd love to see Elvis. My grandmother was a diehard Elvis fan, and he was sort of genreless, which I love about artists is when you can't really define them, and yeah, he's a badass. So
Excellent.
Elvis, yeah.
And you've sort of, you may have answered this question, but Mark Tombury from Crieff. Mark? Oh, there's Mark over there. Yeah, he's saying now, my church makes reference to Hank and Cash. Who's your hero, idol, and without exception, country music stars, musicians seem humble and grounded. What do you put that? Well, you can maybe answer the second part, because you've probably answered the first part. But he's saying country music seem humble and grounded. And maybe that's not your experience, but if it's true, what do you put it down to, Maren?
No, I think it's absolutely true. I think, I don't really know much outside of the country genre. Just in the last year, I've gotten to really get to know a lot of these artists, and, they turn out to be as kind as you hoped they would be. I was really fortunate enough to go on tour last year with Keith Urban and collaborate with Vince Gill and all these people that I've grown up listening to. And I think it's one of the most humble genres because, it's just rooted in honesty and truth and taking things at face value. And I think the town of Nashville, if you ever have been or get to go, it's one of the kindest places. Even though it's a city, it's everyone there is so, I don't know, you can't be a jerk and last in Nashville long. And I think that's a rule they have definitely kept in place over the last 50, 60 years. So honestly, it's one of my favorite places I've lived, and I think they sort of hold that torch of kindness when we go to other award shows, and everyone just roots for each other, which is nice because it can be scary, and to have friends in this genre that really root for you and are genuinely supportive, I feel very at home in country music.
Tell me this, just to follow on from that, did you ever think, I don't want to be labeled country? Because there is that thing in America that the genre radio stations, where over here we don't really have that as such. We don't have a country station, we don't have an R&B station. A lot of us grew up listening to Radio 1 in the UK, which just played lots of things. If they were country and good, we played them. Do you have any regrets about that? Did you have to kind of throw in your lot with country music? Or would you like to do what Taylor Swift's done, to kind of move out of that and to cross over?
Well, it's such a loaded question to think about the future in those terms. I think as a Texan and as a country music lover, I'll always be rooted in country music. I think my music will always be really truthful and soulful and rootsy. But at the same time, I grew up listening to all sorts of genres too. There were no boundaries when I listened to music, and I'm the same now. So I feel like, a lot of the artists I look up to have been trailblazers. You think about Johnny Cash, and they considered him more of a pop star, and he was such a rebel back then. He was literally and he and Merle Haggard were run out of Nashville for a while, and Patsy Cline considered Walking After Midnight a pop song. And you think about it now, and it's crazy because it's country to me, but I think the artists that are originals and don't really think about it in those bracketed terms. They just want to make music that makes people feel good and feel something. And so I don't know what my future will hold in that way, but I know I'll always be rooted in country music, even if it has a tinge of R&B or soul or pop, which my record has. So I think I'll just continue down that road and not see in those lines.
Fantastic. Well, we're very grateful for that, and we're very grateful for your time. I think you've kind of we've had to kind of prise you away from your sound check, and we feel sorry for that. But just very final question. Tonight, what can we expect?
Well, since I didn't get a sound check, just blame Ricky if I sound bad tonight. No. No, I'm just kidding. I think I'm so excited. I've never been to Scotland, so I'm excited to see the crowd. And you guys have all been so kind and had great questions. I think we're gonna have a party tonight.
Excellent. Well, we're looking forward to it hugely. Ladies and gentlemen, Maren Morris.